Hi, and welcome back to the panel room. Tonight, we are going to be talking about one of those fun topics, haunted places. So as we're going in and talking about haunted places this evening, I'm going to be your host, Jim Nettles. But before we dive into the horrors of the building, the outside, and whatever else may fall in between in those luminous spaces, let's see who else has come to join us this evening. So Elizabeth, you are up first.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Davis. I am one half of Dead Fish Books. And my main qualification for being on this panel is I've written several stories about haunted places, including Intavsa Galleria, Tales of Retail Horror, the time that a ghost of the mall was rampaging around.
Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth Dolgner. I write paranormal fiction and nonfiction, and I was a ghost tour guide for many years in the North Georgia town of Roswell, not to be confused with the New Mexico Roswell.
Different aliens. Daryl, you were up first, or up next.
Hey, I'm Daryl Grizzle. I'm the author of I Never Meant to Start a Murder Cult and Other Stories. It's a short story collection that has several ghost stories in it. Also recently had a ghost poem published in Georgia Gothic, which is an anthology that has disappeared.
As it say, is it disappeared?
Yeah, there we go.
It's a ghost
spectral tome.
All right. Gini and Jessica, who are on this panel, are also in that anthology. So,
Jenny?
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Doll Books. I also write under a variety of pen names and in all lengths and genres, including things that involve ghosts, ghost hunting, hauntings, and similar.
Jess?
I'm Jessica Nettles. I'm the author of Children of Menlo Park, which features a ghostly detective. I also have a story in Georgia Gothic, but it's not a ghostly story. But I do write ghostly stories.
And Liv.
Hello, I'm Liv, and I write romance, paranormal or historic or both. My current project is the sequel to The Vampire's Pirate, which is cleverly called The Pirate's Vampire, a decision I may come to regret at some point. And it's obviously about vampires and pirates in 1805 New Orleans.
So let's start talking a little bit about haunted places around us. A lot of us are here in the South, and as we all know, there might be a few family haunts down here as well. So Elizabeth, for you, how does it kind of fall in for you? Are there family stories? Are there places around you that are inspirations that you might want to pull into story or you've used in stories?
Let's see. Well, I have some my own real life experiences, such as being chased out of the woods near a rec center by a growling something. And the time I saw something without bones and glowing all bright in the backyard. But what I tend to use for inspiration in local geography is the fact that Ohio is ancient Native American mound country. And if you want more about that, Google Adina and Hopewell.
How about you, Beth? Especially since you used to lead a few of those ghost tours.
I did. I certainly have a lot of ghost stories from my time living in Georgia. I was there for about 20 years. And not just my own personal experiences as a ghost tour guide and as a ghost hunter, but my mother moved to Savannah about 20 years ago. And of course, Savannah is just crawling with ghosts. And so she's had a number of experiences since moving there. But now I am in Tucson, Arizona, and we moved into a funky little Victorian bungalow that I am 99% sure came with its own ghost. So I'm having fun with my my new roommate, as it were.
Daryl, how about you?
well, I'm from Marietta, Georgia, which is very haunted. My office on Marietta Square is 1 block away from the Kennesaw House, which has been named by several of those ghost hunting shows as one of the most haunted buildings in America. I'm not sure how they measure that, but I also go 2 or 3 times a year to Savannah, and I'm wearing the shirt for the Pirates House, which is one of the legendary haunted places in Savannah. And like Beth said, Savannah is just crawling with ghosts. So,
Jenny?
I'm originally from Southern California, and we spent over 20 years in Arizona. And I'm going to tell you, ghosts don't just favor the South. I've had haunted experiences pretty much all over Los Angeles, the Southland, particularly Westchester and Hollywood. Where Arizona has some tremendously haunted places. And Beth, you want to get down to the Hotel Gadsden in Douglas. That was probably the most terrifying ghost experience I've ever had.
Wow.
That place, super horrifyingly, massively haunted. Also, Jerome, Flagstaff, and Prescott all have haunted places, and I've stayed at all of them. I've discovered that if I am with somebody, the ghosts tend to leave me alone. If I'm by myself, I'm really a party, apparently. So when we went down to Savannah and we went on the tour, so I was like, I know where that is. Nothing happened because I was with this huge group, and I'm just like, mental note, don't go there alone. Mental note, don't go there alone. So yeah, definitely believe it. It helps when you're writing it.
And definitively in Savannah, you are guaranteed to see some spirits.
Yeah.
So
Or at least drink some.
Or drink some. Yeah.
Or drink some, or both.
That's really the right answer right there.
How about you, Jess?
Well, I grew up near Marietta in the Powder Springs area, and I also have connections to Savannah. So the spirit thing is strong in this one, and also in the family. So we have a family history of seeing things. Although, according to my child who sees spirits, I am a squib. I cannot see spirits, but I do sense things, and I do sense when things are off. So I guess that's something. But yeah, I mean, that kind of hauntings and that sort of thing has always been a part of our family tradition. And I mean, we literally live in a space where war happened. So, and then on top of, underneath all of that is where, a strong foundation of Native American culture happened before we got here. We have mountains too. And so, yeah. So there's a lot of activity here, and it's kind of exciting. So does it influence? Oh, heck yeah. Oh, heck yeah.
I just realized when talking about family, I forgot about my husband's side of the family, who is the most unlucky people when it comes to haunting. So his aunt grew up in this horrifically haunted house that I've only managed to get a few stories from her about it, and the fact that her father, once they all moved out, refused to stay to ever be in the other side of the house where most of the hauntings took place. Who now promptly works in a flower shop with a haunted basement. They own a farmhouse, which is haunted. And they also have a regular house that they built fresh on the ground, nothing there previously. And of course, it came with a ghost.
There's always something there previously. That's the thing we have to remind ourselves. There's always been something there previous to us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're just waiting for us.
How about you, Liv?
So the question is how places and how they influence me? Just checking.
Are there any places in particular or any stories or things like that have influenced you in your work?
So I'm afraid of the dark. So just about anywhere I am, I can freak myself out. I don't have to be any place special. I live in Seattle. There's not a lot of, it doesn't have a reputation as a particularly haunted place, although the Pike Street Market haunted ghost tour is pretty cool. And the closest I've had to a ghostly experience was something freaky that happened in a stairwell at a major university medical center. And I have no idea what was on that land before 69-ish when that hospital opened. If you talk to the nurses, I work in the NICU, and so if you talk to the nurses there, they will, if you dig a little, you can figure out which patient rooms some of the babies haven't left. And so, yeah, where I am, I make my own freaky party.
Well, let's talk a little bit about haunted places in fiction, because, when we look at film, TV, books, look at how much the location is always almost a character of its own. And sometimes is the most important character is where you're at and how things, come about and the things you experience. The location itself is so much of the story. So, Beth, how about you? So if you're looking at the idea of writing a haunted tale, how much does the location play into it for you? And how would you craft that haunted place? What are the things that you absolutely have to have there for you?
Oh, that's a good question. So actually, my first series was a paranormal romance based in Savannah, based on, going there to visit my mom and stay with her and hearing all the ghost stories from her and her friends. But now I write paranormal cozy mysteries. So I like setting spooky tales in small towns. There's just something. I grew up in a small town, and if you cast it in the right light, even the most welcoming little small town, I think, can be really spooky because there's people have secrets that they're hiding, and there's strange things going on that nobody talks about. And in fact, my new series that I'm working on that's going to debut in March of next year, I'm basically inspired by ghost towns of Arizona and places like Tombstone, that have this real connection to the.
We lost you, Beth.
We lost you, Beth.
I don't think she can hear us.
I think she froze up. There we go. Hey, Beth, can you hear us now? And I think we froze.
Did I fade out on you guys?
Yep, we lost you for a minute.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
We got to watch you talk very animately.
Just pretend I said something amazing and all of you can go, yeah, right on.
You did. It was totally
It'll be good.
We all can't wait for it now.
Do you want to go back through it?
No, that's okay. We can move on.
Oh, well.
I don't want to take up time.
So, Daryl, how about you? What is it when you're looking at, writing a tale of horror? How does the location play in? What are the things that you have to work in?
Well, almost every story that I've written that's been published started out as a nightmare, an actual nightmare at night that I had, sometimes recurring nightmare. So a lot of that is driven by what happened in the nightmare. There is a ghost story in my collection called The Lazaretto Ghost, which is based on historical incidents from Tybee Island in the 1700s. And that was fun to write. But other than that story, everything else is based on nightmares, and pretty much just start out recording the nightmare and then go from there. As far as setting is concerned, my favorite settings for ghost stories, and I haven't written one yet, is the old castle on the cliff, that's haunted, or the old house, that's haunted on a cliff, like in The Ghost of Mrs. Muir or The Uninvited. Those movies made me decide that when I become a ghost, I'm going to haunt a seaside cottage on a cliff by the ocean.
How about you, Jenny? What are those locations what are the things you've got to have in the location?
Used to be a mental institution. I got to tell you, how we treat the mentally ill and how we treated them before is horrific and horrifying. In the Happy Acres Haunted Hotel for Active Seniors, that's set in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles. The building exists, and the picture that my cover artist used is the picture of the actual building. And it used to have a mental institution, and horrible things happened, and et cetera, et cetera. In Camp Alien, which is book 13 of my Alien series, I needed someplace absolutely horrible for Kitty and a few of the other characters to be kidnapped to. And I found this place. And so my editor and I are going over it. She goes, this place just is, you're just so over the top. I'm like, oh, no, you don't get it. This place is real. She's like, what? I'm like, yeah, this is the place that made the ghost hunters run away. That's how horrifically haunted it is. You go in and there's just piles of shoes. And if you move the shoes, somehow, when you're not looking, the shoes go back into the pile. Among
What place
other
is this
things.
again?
Pardon?
What place is this again?
The place is in, it's near DC. And I can't remember I should have looked up the name of the place and I can't remember it. But it's about less than an hour from north of DC. And it's horrifically haunted. And you know, it used to be an institution, and where people put anybody who they wanted to get rid of, and some people foolishly thought their loved ones were going to get good care here. And when you see it, it's terrible. And there's tons of pictures. I was drilled down on this thing. So my editor's like, oh my gosh, it's real. Build it up even more. I tell the truth. So what we do to the mentally ill is so horrific. It makes, for me, it's just really obvious all of those places are going to be haunted, whether it's stated or not. But both the place in Boyle Heights and the place outside of DC are confirmed as haunted. And otherwise, I just make up my own thing. But if we're picking like in Derelict, it had to be a ghost ship of some kind. So, which is also pretty creepy. Mine's a set in space, so not a lot of places to run. Of course, there's not a lot of places in the middle of the ocean to run either if you hit the Flying Dutchman. So I agree. I mean, I think your location really matters, but it's not just what it imbues, but what you imbue back in it when you're writing. So, you know, are you describing the creepy enough that, you know, to scare everybody? So I also want to mention that I think overall, those of us who write horror and, you know, really delving into the paranormal, we're probably the nicest and most scared people around. So like Daryl, we're writing nightmares, but we don't want to live them.
How about you, Jess? What are the things when you're writing a haunted location? What are the things that go into it that make it for you?
I really like locations that are kind of contained. So like one of my favorite novels is Michael McDowell's The Elementals, and it's on an island in southern Alabama, and it involves this house that's kind of abandoned. And there are two houses on the island. One is abandoned and kind of half covered in sand dunes. And throughout the novel, it's shifting and changing and trying to devour the people in the other house.
Wow.
And it's so creepy. So I love that idea of a house that actually sort of has its own persona. You see this in The Haunting of Hill House too, where the house sort of takes on its own personality, and you begin to wonder if it's more than just a spirit, if it's an actual sort of entity. I sort of explore that in my short story, Omega Station, where I have a space station that may or may not be haunted. I really love enclosed spaces when we talk about hauntings and people having to interact with those hauntings. I think that's an important part for me because I'm afraid of being enclosed.
Liv, how about you? When you're setting up a haunted location, what is it that really, really sets it up for you?
Well, let me
know
ponder.
pirate ships.
I think, what's that?
I said, we know pirate ships, so.
Yeah, pirate ships. No, I'm thinking, I've been kind of struggling with this actually, because I have an idea for like Gothic romance, Victorian Gothic romance thing, and I can't seem to settle on the right location. Part of that is because wherever I choose, I feel like I need to know the place fairly well, whatever city, whatever type, whatever the architecture, I need to really have a grasp of it. And a month or so ago, I did a poll in my reader group asking whether they would like a Gothic Victorian set in London or New Orleans or San Francisco. And San Francisco won. And so I need to I'm sort of kicking ideas around in my head because regardless of zip code or, like I said, type of architecture, wherever I set it, I need to really know it or have a grasp of it in my head. Or pirates.
How about you, Elizabeth?
Well, more pirates is always good. What I look for, and this is not something I necessarily look for in series because you tend to know the characters pretty well and you're more engaged in, we get to see these people in a wacky situation, wacky/horrific. But when you're doing standalones, I think it's important to have a person's personal history mirror that of the house or institution to allow some blending between the ghosts and them as they get more and more entrenched in the haunting. I'm pretty tired of blank slate protagonist walks in and we get this whole, very interesting history of the house and all that, but we're still stuck with this blank slate protagonist.
So Beth, you want to try again? What is it about the haunted locations that really does it for you?
Yeah, cross your fingers, Al. My IT guy, aka my husband, said he is trying something, so hopefully this works. I grew up in a small town where we had a lot of ghost stories about the old buildings in town, a lot of urban legends, and I think for a lot of us, the place that we live or the place that we grew up really provides so much of the fodder for our inspiration today as writers. Even if we're not directly borrowing the stories or the characters from those ghost stories we grew up around, we're at least very much inspired by them. And for me, I love to capture that kind of, I like a setting that feels like the real world. So then when the paranormal elements start to come into the story, my readers think, well, maybe this could happen. Maybe this could be possible. So I kind of like getting people comfortable before I start scaring them. Did we make it through that time with no?
Yes, we made it through that time. We made it. So, when we talk about writing about haunted places, I wrote a series that was set on a kind of nondescript plantation that's haunted by two crazy little old lady ghosts. And harassed by their cousin that lives across the lake. That's kind of inspired by Boone Hall Plantation out of Charleston. It's now set as a tourist venue. When you play with some of the ideas, when you play with the tropes of the haunted location, Elizabeth, you kind of hinted at this a little bit. There's always the tropes that we love, and there's the tropes that drive us nuts when we see them. So, Daryl, what is your favorite trope to play with when you're talking about haunted locations and the ghost stories?
I'm partial to stories and also ghost movies that are set in haunted lighthouses. And again, that's, my love of Savannah and Tybee Island coming out. I'm working on a sequel to my Tybee Island ghost story that is set in the lighthouse. And hopefully that'll be up and ready soon. But that's probably one of my favorite locations or tropes for haunted places.
The light that flashes, but ever so briefly.
There's so much and that's an enclosed space too, which is always good for ghosts.
And you're on the coast, you've got the fog.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Jenny? What's your trope?
I spend too much time watching Scooby-Doo, so it's always, is there a man in a mask? Because, but that's, for me, that's more, it depends on what I'm going for. If I'm going for an answer, then it's a man in a mask. If I'm going for, the creepy and the answer is the paranormal, then I'm trying to think, honestly, my trope is my setting. My favorite trope is find someplace that used to be a mental institution and preferably also a hospital during times when medicine was awful and way worse than now. Though that's my trope, because if I think about it, the majority of my settings fall around that. I do them differently, and I mean, in the Night Beat, which is the first of my Necropolis Enforcement Files, I mean, ghosts are part of the Night Beat. They're not really haunting, they're helping, or they're not. It depends on which side of the fight they're on. But if someone says you got to write a ghost story right now, go, it's going to get set in a former mental institution. So that's my trope.
Jess, how about you?
I really love the whole trope of locking people into a haunted house and having them sit overnight. I don't know why that tickles me so much, but I just really love that, especially if Vincent Price is involved. But I haven't written a story like that, but I just, for some reason, that is just the most fun, because then you have that question of, is it real? Is it not? That maybe it's a Scooby-Doo thing too. I'm of that era. So that's a favorite trope. And also just the whole, I also have a favorite trope in that the haunting involves a house that's connected with family, and there's a family connection going on. So there's some kind of family yaya underneath that haunting. And maybe that's part of being Southern, and I just love the family connection. I don't know.
The good news is, thanks to ghost hunters and live streaming, the trope of being locked in the house for a night is back in vogue.
Oh yes, of course.
How about you, Liv? What's that trope that you love? What's the one that really will set the hook for you every time?
Well, romance writer. So I like the idea of one main character being psychic or sensitive or in some way in tune with the ghost, and the other being the skeptic and the sort of rational, and how the two of them navigate whatever crazy pants situation they're in, and navigate their relationship when they're coming at it from such different perspectives. My writing partner and I, Irene Preston, co-write a Haunts and Hoaxes series, and that's the basic premise. And yeah, if I read a blurb and it's like spooky guy and skeptical guy, I'm on with that in a haunted house or a haunted hospital or whatever.
Elizabeth, how about you? What's your trope?
So when it comes to horror, I like the idea of mirroring. I touched on this a bit. I don't always need like a family connection or a personal. I knew someone and that's who's haunting me, but more of when somebody sees a ghost and it mirrors their own life, their own struggles in some way. Such as someone who is a widow facing down a spectral bride would be a interesting story. Since you get to make the metaphor as subtle as a brick, and that's the way I like them. Non-creepy stuff, I really like stories about ghosts just hanging out and doing normal things. Such as, what does a ghost do when they're not haunting the place? And I was just reflecting on that I made a whole little cozy community of ghosts that live in the ghost of a hotel. Which leads and just them watching and their thoughts on how the world has changed since they died.
How about you, Beth? What's that trope that you love?
I absolutely love the unfinished business trope. I love especially a ghost who's who's acting really horribly, doing awful things to my protagonist, and yet they're acting out because ultimately they need help and they don't know how to ask for it. They haven't learned how to communicate their need. And so I love, especially since I write cozy mysteries, I love being able to kill off a character and then help their ghost find some answers as to who killed them.
So now that we've talked about the fun trope, the one you love, what's the trope that when you see it, you hear it, you read it, it makes you want to throw the book across the room because it's A, usually not done well, or B, it's just usually so overdone that you just can't deal with it anymore. So Jenny, how about you? What's that trope you just can't take anymore?
When you're like, I have no answer. I have no I spent, in between listening and getting distracted from desperately trying to come up with this answer that I knew was coming.
You love them all as an answer too, but yeah.
Well, I think I do for the most part. I think where I go in is what I don't like is that it's so that the ghost, the spirit, whatever it is trying to kill you, and some of that is just because, frankly, I'm afraid of things like that. And because, like Liv, I'm afraid of the dark, and I can freak myself out. Oh, any old way, any old how. But while I don't think that every spirit out there is, peace, love, and Bobby Sherman, because I know they're not. I guess it's just the place is haunted, and that instantly means everybody's going to die. I guess I lean more on, what Beth was saying, let's help them, right? We can help each other. I preferred that over the it's all blood.
Jess, how about you? What's that trope you can't stand anymore?
See, I'm having trouble too, and the best I can probably come up with is just assuming when you come into a haunted place that everybody's evil. And I saw this trend go through some of the ghost hunting shows for a while when I was watching them, where the hunters would go in and they would suddenly declare, well, just everything here is evil. Everything is evil. And they're all out to get us. And I'm like, not every spirit in this place is going to be evil. Now, let's be real. So if we're going to assume that, then that kind of sucks the fun out of everything. I mean, all people are not evil. All spirits are not evil.
Let's be honest. When I come back as a poltergeist, I have a list of people to haunt.
Oh, I know you are evil. So
Look, just because he wants to haunt them doesn't mean he's necessarily evil. Some people just need some pranks pulled on them.
It's a family trait.
And it is a family trait. So I can I can say that he is honestly evil because I probably am too. There are people I want to haunt too.
So Liv, how about you? What's that trope that when you see it, you hear it, you just can't take it anymore?
I've never been a huge fan of character moves into old house and there's a ghost and they fall in love. But and somehow that's gonna work out. And
how dare you attack me and Daryl and our love of the ghost in Mrs. Muir? Okay, we are both personally attacked.
My heart hurts just a little bit too, but I think that's a little different.
I'll give an exception for that. But I mean, I guess because like Jim said, it's often not well done. And while I can absolutely believe in, vampires and werewolves and magic and just about any paranormal, whatever, my bridge too far is the character falling in love with the ghost and having some kind of afterlife together. I don't even know.
Spectral love. So, Elizabeth, how about you? What's the trope you can't take?
Well, I already mentioned blank slate protagonist, and one very specific trope that I'm up to here with is when it turns out it isn't a ghost at all, it's someone hiding in the walls. No, not just a person with a mask, someone hiding in the walls. So far, I've only seen one movie that did it well, and that is Housebound or Homebound, a New Zealand horror comedy. So other ways of just going, I have so many logistical questions. So many.
Yeah. How do you not notice that somebody
I
is going to the bathroom in your walls after a few days? That's just start there. Yeah.
I mean, with the actual cases, that's usually explained when you go, okay, so that's where the steps been going. I mean, I could either take the explanation of they've been sneaking off to the bathroom and no one is looking. But and most of those movies, you're like, I have questions. So many questions.
You want to close plot holes? Please. So, Beth, how about you? What is that trope when you see it, you just look and shake your head and makes you want to throw the tablet across the room?
I feel like when I say this, Gothic literature fans are going to maybe not like me so much, but I am so tired of the woman in white trope. And a lot of that actually is not because of fiction, but because it has made the leap into allegedly true ghost stories. There are so many stories. I mean, even just here in the US of haunted places, and they say, oh, we have this woman in white and she's spotted, on the stairs or on the second floor or wherever it may be. And I just feel like it's kind of lazy storytelling. Like if you're going to have a haunted place, at least give me some better detail than just, oh, it's a woman in white.
Someone actually had a lot of fun with that trope, hypothesizing the woman in white aren't actually ghosts, but are some spectral army that is slowly creeping in.
Oh, I like it.
I love that.
I like it.
I'm going to steal that. That's kind of cool.
It's a herd of red hat ladies in the afterlife. Daryl, how about you?
Get behind.
Oh, yeah. Well, now I'm going to have an entire army after me now. So, Daryl, how about you?
The one thing that I really hate is the only thing that really comes to mind is the woman who sacrifices herself so that either the man can live or so that the, plot can move forward. And basically you have this woman either dying or sometimes in worst case scenarios being raped just to advance the plot. And I think that's a horrible thing. And that's why I stopped reading Alan Moore, because, he was using rape as a plot device so freaking much, the
Alan Moore drinking game.
So, Jess.
Yeah.
So we've looked at tropes. When what story, if you were to look at one, what is a story, be it one of yours, be it something you've read, something you've seen, something you've watched, what's one of those stories that when you look at it is really the thing that you go and say, this is kind of that perfect encapsulation of the haunted location, the haunted place?
The Elementals, Michael McDowell. It's perfect. I read it about 3 years ago, and a friend recommended it, and I'm like, well, what is this? And I was totally blown away. It's perfection. It's so creepy, and he uses water, and water is a continued element in his writing. He uses water as an element to escalate fear. And the house is just, you're never sure what the haunting is in the house, but you come away. I still think about that house and shudder, and I'm not even sure what I'm afraid of, but it's frightening, and it's perfect, and it's perfectly Southern, and I would read it again and again. It's just delicious.
Liv, how about you? What's one case of that haunted ghost story, that haunted location? What's the story that really for you is that model?
So I don't, given my fear of the dark, I don't read a whole lot of real spooky stuff, but the book Melmoth by Sarah Perry was to me the perfect ghost story. And it's set in Prague, which is not a city that you necessarily associate with ghosts. I think there are some scenes in Vietnam, again, not a place that's associated with ghost stories, or the Philippines. I can't remember. Anyway, but places that I'm not familiar with, and yet the author weaves such an incredibly tight and incredibly frightening story that, that would be my recommendation. And the way she uses the setting, and maybe it's because I'm not familiar with these places particularly, made it scarier for me.
Elizabeth, how about you? If there's one story that you could use as a model that you think everybody needs to read to see that haunted location, that ghost story?
I'm going to be real basic here and go The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson.
Yes.
The adaptation on Netflix is pretty good, and so is the black and white movie. You can kind of skip the movie in between.
Yes.
But nothing quite beats the book, which really does well to depict the character of the house in ways that would be too slow in a movie, such as when they're in the library and they're looking through this book, and what they don't describe adds a bit more horror. That you can't do that in a movie quite as much, of sitting there and listening to the characters describe something. But that's one stories. They find a book in the library and they're like, oh, and you have the characters describing this. They're like, can you believe he showed this to his kids? And also it just does a very good job of showing how the previous family makes up the character of the house. The haunting in the house cannot be taken from each other, because the family left such a big imprint on how the house was created.
Mm-hmm.
Beth, how about you? What's the story that when you look at it is that great model for the haunted house story?
I'm going to echo Elizabeth and say The Haunting of Hill House. I love it when the house or the castle or whatever the place is in which the story takes place cannot be trusted any more than the ghosts to inhabit it. Where, houses are supposed to be a place of refuge. You're supposed to feel safe. And when you take that away from the reader, when you take that away from the protagonist, I think it's incredibly powerful. And I think some of my favorite real world ghost stories are about places where the houses seem to have kind of taken on a personality of their own. The one that I think of immediately is a house in Savannah at 432 Abercorn Street that was sat vacant for many, many years. And if you Google the stories about that place, people literally have aversions to that house and do not want to walk past it on the sidewalk because it feels so bad. I know people whose dogs will refuse to walk past that house. And so I love that, where the house is no longer the safe refuge that it's supposed to be.
Daryl, how about you? What's your influence? What's that favorite story?
The old crumbling Victorian mansion in Crimson Peak. That would be my favorite. That it's related to the old house in The Haunting of Hill House, because it's a place where the house itself is a character in the story. So
many influences in that movie.
Yeah. Guillermo del Toro said that Crimson Peak was his homage to the Hammer horror film classics, and you can see those influences in that movie as well. Beth was talking about Savannah, and I remember going on a ghost tour that included the Sorrel Weed House in Savannah, and the basement of that house had been used as a hospital during the Civil War. And there was one corner where I just felt where I couldn't go. It's like I felt this heaviness, oppression, almost like I was going to throw up. And I was with my ex, and he is a lot more sensitive to paranormal things than even I am. And he had to leave. He couldn't stay in the basement because of whatever was in that corner. So,
Daryl, I know exactly the spot you're talking about in that basement, because my husband and I were in that basement, and my husband is the biggest skeptic in the world. And even he suddenly looked at me and said, "We need to leave this place right now. We need to get out of this room that we're in." And I was like, "Let's go."
Ginny, how about you? What's that story for you?
Like Liv, I'm afraid of everything, so I read very, very carefully. So my answer is a film, The Sixth Sense. To me, that is the most perfectly done ghost story, and it touches on a lot of things that, good and bad, related to the child who is under torture for no good, but at the same time, once they crack the code of what he's actually able to do, he's able to release spirits and let them go on to the next plane. So I really love that. And there's a story, I cannot remember the author. This is a short story, and I read it many moons ago now, but it's kind of a different take on Laura, where the investigator falls in love with the dead girl. This all from the heroine's POV. Her butler, she's rich and pretty, and her butler pushes her down the stairs to kill her. And she's desperately trying to get through and say, no, he did it. She is able to reach the police detective that is there, and he is not a good-looking person. He's ugly. In fact, she's hearing him talking about how, a girl this beautiful would never look at him, and then the butler kills him, and she's screaming, trying to scream a warning, and his soul is this beautiful thing, and he leaves, and he comes back, and he helps her, and they go talk. They basically both go talk to his captain, and justice prevails, and then they get to go off together. It was just really, really sweet and loving. So I guess mine are anywhere somebody actually is able to release the spirits and allow them to move on. Those are always the ones that I think are the best.
I honestly thought they were both going to push the butler downstairs.
No, they want him
I was
tried. They
hoping.
want him tried for justice, and he's going to be for 2 murders. So the captain figures it out, and because they're screaming. If both of us work together, literally, this is a line. If both of us work together, maybe we can do it, and they can't. So
as we're looking at coming in, talking about wrapping this up, we always have that one thing, one question or one idea that comes up when we're working on a book, working on a story, something else along these lines. So what is the one thing we haven't touched on tonight about haunted places, haunted locations, this craft of storytelling? What's the one thing you think that somebody who's wanting to craft a story like this should know? So Liv, you're up first.
New Orleans. I think that you can't go wrong setting a spooky story. There's so many places in that town and in the state of Louisiana that lend themselves to spooky. So that's the one thing I haven't. I've got 2 or 3 series set there, and basically it just gives me an excuse to keep going back to visit. But that's the one thing I would say.
So the first thing is make sure you're going to set a story somewhere you want to visit so it becomes tax deductible. Yep. Elizabeth, how about you? What's the one thing we haven't talked about tonight?
I would say would be learning how to do a little bit of historical research into helping to craft your ghost story, if nothing else, to move away from, tropes that we love but have been done to death, such as the moldering Victorian house and all that, and to get a better grasp of how the history impacts the world around you. Makes it so much easier to craft a ghost story when you go, oh, this building used to be part of this. Hey, I bet this building used to be armory. I bet I could write a ghost story about this haunted building that used to be armory. So that's what I'd say is look into what it takes to do research into the history of buildings and stuff like that. There's a lot of resources out there.
Beth, how about you? What's yours?
You know, I've experienced paranormal activity in group settings on tours and as a ghost hunter. And I think what's so interesting to me is that everybody experiences paranormal activity differently. And I think as a storyteller, that gives you so much potential to have your characters perceive something differently from each other. Whether somebody hears the haunting, maybe somebody else sees the haunting, maybe you have the clueless person who never experiences anything at all. And I think that just gives you great storytelling potential.
Daryl?
I think for me, it's the woods, the unknown part of the forest. I've got a story coming out, I think next month, in a folk horror anthology that is set in the North Georgia mountains at an abandoned cemetery out in the woods. And it's based on a nightmare, like all my stories are. But it's also based on a memory of going deer hunting with my grandfather when I was a boy. And we came across an abandoned cemetery in the woods in this wildlife management area. And some of those tombstones were still standing. Some had been knocked over. And it was right before sunrise. So it was still kind of dark out. And all of a sudden, while I'm looking at this abandoned graveyard with my grandfather, this screech owl or barn owl just screams its head off, like really close to us. It scares the hell out of me. So, but there's a bit of that shows up in the story as well.
Jenny, how about you? What's the one thing we haven't touched on?
Talk really fast because I have a couple. One, Google Maps is really your friend. You do not necessarily have to physically go someplace in order to write about it. It helps, and also people are really, really happy to help you research where they live, understanding that you can't get there. So never be afraid to, put out a shout on Twitter or Facebook or whatever social media you're using and say, hey, can anybody help me with this? I've had to do it more than once, and everybody's always really great with it. Also, there are a lot of books that you'll find on remainder tables and in used bookstores that are like, 25 creepy things and, the old haunty stuff, where someone is doing like a nonfiction version of little short stories. And anytime my husband and I spot them, we buy them because they're actually a wealth of information. Somebody's already kind of given you an outline, if you will, a blueprint. Yeah, you've got a character, you've got a location, you've got a date, and things like that are really great to extrapolate off of. And then one last thing, the reason that this picture is with an orchard, I find most orchards, especially those with trees, to be incredibly creepy. There's something about the rows and how they're planted, and then if they're wild, I'm a city girl. Nature scares me. So it's just, you can find terror wherever you look. Yeah. So, if any, like Daryl was saying, if you look at something, anything that catches your eye, that can be creepy. It can be a beautiful sunny day. If there's a creepy thought, take it and run with it.
Jess, how about you? What's the one thing we haven't touched on tonight?
I probably got a couple of things. So one, if you want to go find creepy places, find friends who like to go to creepy places too. So like Daryl and I go on creepy adventures sometimes. And we've explored cemeteries. We've explored creepy abandoned hotels, which are really kind of cool and fun. Dangerous, but fun.
Just watch out for
you can get some watch out for spiders and things like that, right? And creepy plants, things like that. But no, go
Also,
out and have adventures. Pardon?
Mold. I said, make sure to remember to wear a face mask. Mold can mess you up.
Oh yeah. Well, we didn't go inside. It was like a hotel motel on the side of the road, and it was just kind of crumbling. And so we went on the property and took photographs. It was incredible, and really creepy. So don't be afraid to explore those creepy places, and put the mask on if you go inside. So yeah, explore. Go out there and see what you can see, and don't be afraid to turn the tropes on their head. because sometimes you can turn the ghost trope on its head and find something different to say that maybe nobody else has done before. Tell the story from the ghost point of view. Do something different with that ghost. Make for an interesting, different story.
And coming up next season on ConTinual is going to be Creepy Adventures with
Daryl and Jess.
I was going to say is I actually have halfway abandoned old GM factory that now has a glass factory and only part of it near my house. I keep meaning to go out there and take some pictures.
Oh, you should. That'd be so much fun.
and a great place to get rid of the bodies in this is in the steel furnaces.
Absolutely.
Well, before I turn you guys loose from the cornfields, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you. And because there's no adults in the room, I'm going to go backwards. So, Liv, let everybody know where to find you. Website, social media, and of course, what book do they need to pick up and add to that to-be-read pile this season?
So I am at livrancourt.com or on most social media sites with subtle variations of Liv Rancourt, either at liv.rancourt or, but I'm there, except TikTok because I'm old. And the, if the book that is, am I on the right side? Is on in my background, the Vampire's Pirate is a great place to start. It's a novella, and I don't know when this will be going live, but it's on sale for the rest of the month of September for only 99 cents.
Jess?
You can find me at jessicannettlesauthor.com on most of the social medias except TikTok, not because I'm old, but because it terrifies me.
Speaking of haunted locations.
You can find my latest short story in a anthology called A Woman Unbecoming, which is a wonderful thing. You should pick it up. It is on Amazon right now. We will also have paper copies at MultiverseCon in October. I'm so excited about that.
Mention what story you have in it.
Which story is in it? I have to remember the name of it.
It's a really cool story set in the woods.
It's a really cool story. It's
with, witches who are not necessarily friendly witches. It's a great story.
Hey, they're having tomato sandwiches and tea. Are you kidding? They're nice people. Nice people. You should read it.
And the bacon, never mind. Jenny.
Yeah, anyway.
www.ginikoch.com. I am on Twitter. I am on Facebook way too much. Gini Koch, Hairspray, Rock and Roll, author of the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series. I'm also on Pinterest. It looks like I'm on Instagram, but I'm not. Please stop. And I'm not going to be on TikTok because I can spend 3 hours trying to make a video, or I can write, and I know what everybody's voting for. If you want to get part of my view, Happy Acres Haunted Hotel for Active Seniors would be where I would start. It's a novelette, and it kind of gives you my worldview, because Camp Alien is book 13, and I really started with one. It's don't leap into the middle of the series, just read that, or pick up Derelict, which is a full anthology of haunted ships of some kind. So that's very good for the creepy. And if you just want to see ghosts doing good, that's the Night Beat.
Daryl, how about you?
I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads. I'm slowly setting my foot into TikTok, but I only have a few videos posted there. I'm still scared of it. In fact, I'm currently working on a horror story about TikTok. So we'll see. My website is shadowhaunted.com. And the book to pick up is going to be I Never Meant to Start a Murder Cult and Other Stories. And it's got some ghost stories and also some, true, crime, serial killer, bodies in the trunk type stories as well.
Beth?
Yeah, you can find me online at bethdolgner.com, and there's links there to my social media. I also am frightened of TikTok and do not post on that platform. I would say for me, probably for fiction, you should probably start with my current series, which is the Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast Paranormal Cozy Mysteries. Book 1 is called Sweet Dreams, and I'm actually working on book 7 right now. It comes out in December. It's set in a small town, North Georgia, lots of ghosts who need help and have unfinished business. And then for nonfiction, if you like ghost stories, I have a book called Georgia Spirits and Specters. That is a collection of Georgia ghost stories.
That's awesome. It's an awesome book.
Oh, thank you.
And Elizabeth.
You can find me at deadfishbooks.com. Contact us, should have all of our socials, such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm not on TikTok because I do not want to try to use something that I think is app-only based. Most apps are terrible to use when you're visually impaired. And you can find, I got 2 little things. One is I'm also in Woman Unbecoming. See, rewind a few minutes ago to find out more about that. And my story in that is When She Dances, inspired by the Ishtar dancing scene in Sandman.
Awesome.
And the big announcement is that Deadfish Books is open for submissions for a new anthology called Yay, They Are Here, which is about first contact stories to start hopefully, which sounds very different from Ghost, but since we accept super soft to super hard, you could write about a ghost meeting an alien, or an alien ghost meeting someone, or a ghost after we blow ourselves up that's there to meet the aliens. Or maybe it's both are ghosts because they blew themselves up. Or maybe you accidentally send a ghost to the stars like a satellite and that meets aliens that way.
Very cool.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming and joining us this evening, and I have had the pleasure of being your host, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the speculative fiction academy.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see everybody again soon.
Bye.